to contribute to a more sustainable planet. That is our goal, to do more with much less. A more sustainable agriculture through the efficient use of resources. Our effort is based on efficient use of water. We promote the development of technified agriculture, seeking to deliver in each drop of water everything necessary to achieve higher yields and superior quality. We provide products based on potassium nitrate that help reduce salinity accumulation, eliminating the need for additional irrigation to remove salts from the soil. Solutions of natural origin. Potassium nitrate is produced with the smallest carbon footprint in the industry. International expertise. We are agronomists at heart and have a network of experts around the world. We are driven to make this red the sweetest you have ever produced. This orange, of incomparable flavor. And this green, the most natural you have ever grown. We are committed to this challenge, to contribute to a sustainable agriculture.
Well, hello everyone. Here is Felipe from SQM, based in Belgium. Looks like we have a little problem with Duncan's. Duncan will try to disconnect and connect again. So then let's see if Duncan will be able to join us again to start the webinar.
To fellow South Africans and good day to listeners from around the world. My name is Duncan Napier and I work for the SQM office in South Africa. Now, I'm sorry about that glitch, but my microphone worked in the test period, but it seemed to stop working just now. So anyway, on behalf of SQM and behalf of Intelligro, one of our preferred distribution partners in South Africa, I would really like to welcome you all and thank you for signing into this webinar. Today's webinar is titled Grapefruit Production in South Africa with reference to varieties, production methods, and balanced nutrition concepts. We have 4 presentations lined up pertinent to this topic. This should keep us busy for a little over an hour or maximum 1 hour, 30 minutes. Before I introduce the speakers, I'd like to thank the SQM marketing team in Chile for their hard work in making this webinar possible. Thank you, Brenda. Thank you, Guillermo, and the team. If you have any questions during the presentations, please ask them by writing in the chat box on the right-hand side of your screen. If time permits, these questions will be answered today, and if not today, then each question will be addressed to you at a later stage. Right, our first speaker is John Roberts of the Citrus Growers Association. John started farming in 1984 with his first 10 years in a citrus nursery. Here his interest in new varieties developed due to preempting what the farmers were going to require. John's focus then went into packhouse management of the family JV packhouse, and he was driven on environmental and food and safety aspects with the first citrus packhouse certifications for ISO, Global GAP, and Nature's Choice in this country. Cultivars and new variety developments has remained a core interest for John, who is GM of a new industry cultivar company since October 2011. They have 67 citrus cultivars in evaluation, with 11 now commercial and 11 more of high potential. John will speak on the South African grapefruit industry, touching on varieties. Welcome, John, and over to you.
Thank you there, Duncan. I'll just start the presentation. The first slide is a slide I saw soon after joining the CGA, Cultivar Company, and dates back to about 2011. And already at that stage, we were seeing a reduced consumption. If I look at the era before that, 2001 to 2010, grapefruit was in a boom period. Most years going through 2021 to 25, reaching 542,000 in 2005 and continuing this trend right up to 2009, 562,330 buds sold into the industry, and then started to reduce in 2010 and onwards to 238,000 the following year, I believe, a little over 60,000. That boom led to South Africa becoming a significant producer and leading the leading export country by 2020. And this was on a backdrop, unfortunately, from 2004 to 2011 that I talked about, the slide that showed the start of a general decline in consumption. This information with acknowledgement to Sirad Market News. The one exception being Russia and Eastern Europe, you can see in the light blue and the dark green in the graph. And they were slightly increasing, but against the trend. But understanding that these were from very low levels of consumption. Korea wasn't in this graph at the stage, and soon after that market opened up to South Africa, and in the first few years doubled previous year's consumption annually. But again, keeping in mind that these were from very low levels of consumption. This trend has continued, unfortunately, right through to 2020. Eastern Europe and Russia have continued to grow moderately. As you can see, there's still relatively low consumption, Eastern Europe in red. And the Middle East has shown a little bit of growth. And Japan and the rest of Europe and the USA have basically decreased. And that's led to an overall decline in trade from 814,492 tons to 667,015 tons. And that again, against a backdrop of what was happening in production, in terms of production. This is an interesting slide going back to 2011, showing the relatively high percentage of total citrus area that grapefruit enjoyed at that stage, 15%, totaling 8,978 hectares, which was nearly double the soft citrus and lemons at that stage. That changed very dramatically to 2021, where we now see that grapefruit decreased to 9% of total citrus area, and it dropped right to the bottom to 5th place in the citrus group. Soft citrus and lemons, on the other hand, moved to 2nd and 3rd place. Although the area at 8,661 hectares to now, back to 2011, 8,978 hectares, the hectareage hasn't changed much, which shows that South Africa has maintained its production. And as the leading exporter has obviously maintained its markets to a certain extent. But this probably shows that it's more about maintenance of the area planted and not new growth. So the challenge is to grow the share in the citrus groups with improved varieties to prevent continued reduced consumption levels. Possible future trends that could increase consumption. Very interesting to see the effects of the global pandemic that we're still effectively in, which produced a reverse trend back to hard citrus. And this is probably caused by less trips to the supermarket, limited fridge space in the home. Consumers bought more goods that they could store in the cupboard and down in the veggie rack. Soft citrus doesn't do well in amongst potatoes and onions, and they don't have the same shelf life that hard citrus does. The question, though, remains: can this trend be, this reverse trend, be maintained? And that is questionable. It probably will slowly return to the previous trends that we saw of soft citrus slowly gaining the market. Can improved varieties regain the public interest, though? So things like less bitter, sweet, safe, better taste. We need to penetrate the younger generation. Potential interest in new characteristics could be red cultivars of hard and soft citrus that have a perceived health benefit. The health industry, Florida 914 Ruby Valencia hybrid, which has low furanocoumarins, could reverse the health concerns associated with grapefruit and medication. And then the lycopenes found in red grapefruit and oranges, very interesting work I saw just before the start of the pandemic with Professor Lorenzo Zacharias in Valencia on the high levels of beta-carotenes in the lycopene citrus, which is a vitamin A precursor. Lycopenes, naringin, and naringin antioxidants that are found in Star Ruby grapefruit, and equally the 914. And then anthocyanins that could be crossed, bringing the same list of beneficial antioxidants with new citrus varieties. Just a little bit about a variety that we manage. Johan will expand on some other varieties that other companies manage. The UF914 that I've talked about, in picture there, red flesh color, attractive peel blush, very similar to Star Ruby, grapefruit flavor and aroma, so nothing lost there. Tender and juicy flesh, very low in the furanocoumarins that I've mentioned. It's seedless, it has good bricks, low acid, and a higher ratio than Star Ruby. So once this variety comes into the market, and varieties like it should be able to penetrate the market over time. A very interesting conversation that I followed was a conversation between the breeder of 914 Florida UFIFIS under Professor Fred Gemitter, in a conversation with a retired Swedish doctor about this variety 914, Leif Gothefors, and he inquired about Gemitter's work on UF914. He heard it had good values of taste and nutrition, and also seemed to have the advantage of having a lower content of furanocoumarin, responsible for the effect of a number of drugs. And he stated that his wife and he had been prescribed drugs with the warning, avoid grapefruit. I think that's rather extreme. It's a cautionary. But he added that they, for many years, had a mix of orange and grapefruit juice for breakfast. And so it was annoying that he wasn't allowed to take this with his medication. And Prof. Gemitter responded that 914, it produces fruit with excellent quality, beautiful color, flavor, and aroma, like the Star Ruby, very similar to grapefruit, but tastes sweeter. And yes, he added that it had extremely low to undetectable levels of FC, furanocoumarin. And he went on to say that they tested the fruit and juice chemically to measure FC levels and tested it with human cell cultures and confirmed its lack of interaction with drugs. And finally, they performed a pilot human subject trial. He also added that they would need to do a much larger clinical trial to confirm these results. But his emphasis, and this is the most interesting thing, I think, and the most important, was on the excellent eating quality. He said they tested UF914 with consumer focus groups a few years ago. And the groups were divided into grapefruit lovers and haters. And the haters said that if grapefruit always tasted like this, then they'd buy it and eat it. And I've seen that in Korea in a tasting trial where even kids came up to taste the fruit. The lovers started saying things like the best grapefruit that they'd ever tasted, and if I could buy this, I wouldn't need to put sugar on my morning grapefruit. Having tasted it myself, I believe many younger folk and even children will be enticed into trying this citrus type. And there are several other new exciting cultivars that I've tasted. Extremely impressed with Jackson Seedless, and just my own immediate family and friends, children, asking, please, Mom, buy that stuff at Woolworths if you see it again. So it's very interesting to see the younger kids buying into the grapefruit family. And I think the Jackson experience is something that's going to hopefully increase and bring back the excitement around grapefruit. And then without the furanocoumarin, sorry, harping on about that long word, but the health benefits then outweigh the dangers. And the grapefruit diet has shown very good results in weight loss and health diets over many years. So in summary, I think we need to turn around this trend, considering that the sector that consumes grapefruit the most is the older sector. Life is life, and it's a shrinking sector. We're all moving on, and we need to make it safer for those people who are currently our greatest consumers of grapefruit. More importantly, is to penetrate a new market, the younger market, the kids, and the teenagers and young adults. And I think the only way we're going to do that is by supplying a fruit to the market that is sweet, lower acid, less bitter, and a whole lot more exciting. And the following speaker, Johan Hubert, will expand on a couple of varieties that have come into the industry and are being evaluated currently. So I think there's going to be a very interesting in the next couple of years, and hopefully that we see a turnaround in this sector. Thank you very much.
Right, John, thank you very much, and it's certainly interesting to see this new variety. I'm one of those who love grapefruit, but I also love sugar on my grapefruit, so it'll be interesting to see how these develop, and perhaps our grapefruit hectares will increase also over time. I mean, it stayed stable for 10 years, so hopefully it'll increase. Right, our second speaker, while John and Johan change places, is Johan Hubert of the Citrus Research International. Johan is a program coordinator of cultivar and rootstock evaluations in the citriculture portfolio of CRI. CRI has cultivar and rootstock trials in all citrus growing regions of Southern Africa to determine the best options for specific regions. Johan has 24 years of citrus experience in soil science, entomology, post-harvest research, cultivar and rootstock development evaluation. Johan is a considered cultivar specialist with over 18 years of experience. Thank you, Johan. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Duncan. There you go. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My presentation will give some information on the grapefruit cultivars as well as rootstock options that's available. If we have a look at the different production areas in Southern Africa, the map indicates the different areas, and my main focus will be on the hot, dry, hot, humid, and the semi-desert areas. If we start off with the hot, dry production areas, indicated in red, you'll see it's adjacent to Zimbabwe in the far north. And the two areas up there is the Waipi area and the Chapese area. And similar to these areas is the pH of the soils, which is on the high side. And the main rootstock that we use in that specific area is X639 for that purpose. Later in the talk, I'll give you a little bit more information on the different rootstocks and rootstock options and choices available. And then the older trees was on rough lemon, but on this specific rootstock, you have to be careful of lower internal quality on the fruit. Then the next hard dry area includes Retsitele and Hoedspruit. And if you look at the tree spacing, plant distances is mainly 7 by 3 meters. Both these areas, specifically more Retsitele, there's quite heavy soils. And then in replant conditions, you'll mainly use swingle as a rootstock, providing a bigger or larger tree canopy. And when you move over to the sandier soils or the virgin soils, you'll plant on chorizo. And then obviously you'll have a medium tree size in that specific combination. If we move on to the hot humid areas, that's indicated in the pink area, and it's just below Mozambique. In Mpumalanga, we have the Malalan area and the Komatipoort area. On the Natal side, we have Pongola and Nkwalini. And then in Swaziland, we refer to the lower Swaziland area, specifically Tambuti, including a lot of good quality grapefruit selections and a lot of star ruby in that specific area. And then the southern areas of Mozambique is also included in the hot humid areas. Soil-wise, you also have the heavier soils and replant soils, as previously mentioned, where we plant on swingle. And just a characteristic of swingle is the high acids induced in the fruit, as well as delayed external color development. And then on the sandier soils or the virgin soils, you'll go to chorizo. And when you want a more dwarf tree, there is the option of C35 sit range, and also performing very well on virgin soils and then developing a smaller tree canopy. And then the last area includes the semi-desert area. You'll see that's in the purple areas, the biggest areas in the Northern Cape. Looks like a little worm there. And, sorry, it moved back. There you go. And it's divided into 3 areas. So it's the Uppington or the Groblershoop area, which we recommend as the hot area, the Kakamas area, which we see as the very hot, and then the Blowpits area as the extremely hot. And there you're looking at about in the region of 48 to 52 degrees Celsius in summertime, peak summertime. And because of the soils, the high pH soils in those areas, most of the plantings is on X639 and the older trees is on rough lemon. On the maturity side, the specific table is from Retsitele area, but here you can see as just as a tool to help with future planning and planting of new orchards. The West Star Ruby is basically at the top, starting from middle April to middle July, the longest maturity index, followed by March. There's the 2 Jackson selections, more in the middle. And then there's an experimental variety. I'll mention a little bit more information just now on the Star Ruby Late. Okay, if we have a look at the different cultivars, let's move to that. CRI, we have cultivar fact sheets on the different varieties to provide information. This is an example of what the Star Ruby and the Marsh fact sheet looks like. You can see there's information available on the origin, the ownership, production records, tree characteristics, all those type of things. Very handy when planning new plantings or orchards. If we start off, the commercial varieties at the moment planted is basically Marsh, which is one of our white grapefruit selections from a Duncan seedling. And interesting, in the picture on the right, you can see the typical pale yellow color of the rind. That's typical of Marsh. Fruit size on the large size, average between count 32 and 48. And a very smooth rind texture as well. If we move to our main selection, which is Star Ruby in this case, it's from a Hudson grapefruit, and it originated from irradiated seeds, where the seeds were planted and then selections were made on that. Interesting on the Star Ruby is the deep red color. That's very typical. The deep flesh and the rind color. and very low seed content. In a lot of cases, basically seedless. And then fruit size wise on the Star Ruby, typical is on the smaller side in the grapefruit range, between count 32 and 56. Then the Nel Ruby, and Nel Ruby is mostly planted in those Northern Cape areas, those very hot areas. So interesting here is if you look at the color on the outside, there is a red flesh color, and on the inside, not as dark or deep red color compared to the Star Ruby. Maturity, similar, just a smaller maturity index or window. If we move on to one of the newer commercial varieties, the Red Heart, you can see on the photographs the external color is more pink with a deep red blush, and the internal color is on the red side, similar to, slightly lighter than Star Ruby, but similar. And the fruit shape, on average, is round, and some of the fruit have a slight neck. And very important about the Red Heart, as Johnny mentioned, this is one of the selections with a sweeter taste due to lower nitrogen content, a really high Brix level, and also low acid contents. Then on the white grapefruit side again, the Sweet Sunrise or the Jackson, Sweet Sunrise, the commercial name. It's from a Triumph grapefruit. And what's interesting about this variety is specifically the unique flavor. If you taste the fruit, there's a dash of lime, very high sugars, and no low nitrogen levels, and definitely the lacking of that typical bitterness. The fruit size is on the smaller side, so the pick is around about count 64, very smooth rind texture. And then there's the two selections. So there's the FE1 selection, which is with a seed count ranging from 1 to 3 seeds per fruit. And then there's the JR13 selection, which is the low seed selection, virtually seedless. So this is definitely one of the future selections that it's really a nice fruit with a very nice flavor. If we move on to the future cultivars, on the Star Ruby side, we have a Star Ruby early selection as well as a Star Ruby late selection, both managed by Citrogold. And on the early selection side, it matures before the commercial Star Ruby selection, and the Star Ruby late matures basically from middle July onwards. And that will give us a nice spread on the Star Ruby range. And then on the white grapefruit side, the Alisa, which is managed by Citrus Genesis in South Africa, developed by the Volcani Institute in Israel. Interesting about this variety is the high juice content, very good yields on the trees, and the unique taste of the fruit. And it's basically free of phytonocoumarins. And then on the UF914, Johnny, there was a lot of information about that, but the UF914 is managed by CGACC, and it's a selection from Florida, also with low to undetectable phytonocoumarin levels, red pigmented fruit, seedless fruit, and the color also similar to Star Ruby. If we move on to the rootstocks, just a brief summary, indication of the options available. Once again, from CRI side, we have a rootstock fact sheet available. This is just an example of what the Carrizo one looks like. Interesting information, and then at the end, you can see the general comments, which is basically a summary, and to assist you in choosing the right rootstock for your needs, for your cultivar, your Zion, and your specific soil and climate type. We have the rootstock characteristic table available. There's basically two sides on the table. So the first part is to indicate the compatibility and the suitability of the different combinations. And for instance, on Star Ruby with the US 812, it really gives a small tree. So that's one thing to keep in mind. And then on the second part of the table, it's basically characteristics, including the Phytophthora status, clay content, pH information that you'll need depending on your soil type. Then just interest-wise, the optimum soil pH is between 5.5 and 6. And you can see after that what happens to the availability of the elements. And this also makes a huge difference on the, well, basically the soil type, but also your rootstock choice. The number one rootstock at this stage, where most of the grapefruit is planted on, is Swingle citrumello. And just to summarize, Swingle gives a higher acid level in the fruit. There's a delayed external color on the fruit, very good on replant soils, and due to the tolerance to Phytophthora, nematodes, blight, etc. So if we move on to the number two, that will be Carrizo, developing very good external fruit color. Interesting on the Carrizo side is better on lighter soils, and especially on virgin soils, it performs very well. Gives you a smaller, a medium size, more compact tree compared to Swingle. And then on the high pH soils, as I indicated with the maps, will be X639. That will be one of the main rootstocks to plant on in those specific areas. And quality-wise and all the other characteristics is similar to Carrizo. Then on the new rootstock side, if we look at, we've imported these rootstocks, the bitters, which will give a more compact tree, similar to C35, but with the difference, it's more adaptable to high pH soils and cold tolerant. And then the carpenter and the fir, similar in the sense of developing a medium to large tree size. And the cox is basically to replace the old Benton citrange as a dwarf rootstock, and because of the favorable nursery propagation characteristics, and also a good replant rootstock. I've added the next two slides just to indicate the rootstock trials we're involved in. So the first one is the basic screening trials. And this includes basically one Zion on 10 rootstock trees. And the purpose of these trials is basically to determine the compatibility between the Zion and the rootstock, the range of soil types it's adaptable to, and then on the production side, which is basically, it highlights the fruit set, the optimum fruit size, and the color development of the fruit. And the second trial, we take it a step further, is the semi-commercial rootstock trials. So here we have basically a number of between 50 and 100 trees, and with one commercial Zion. And we do packhouse rounds and quality analysis to determine the color, development, fruit size, and the blemish percentage on the fruit. The harvest periods, we monitor this closely between the early and the later maturities. And obviously, crucial is to determine the yield and the production of these different combinations. And we also allow grower access to these demonstration trials. And that's basically just part of the technology transfer between the CRI and the industry. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed this.
Thank you, Johan. If I had to plant grapefruit trees, you guys would certainly be the people I would talk to. You look very professional in what you do. And thank you for that great presentation. I'd just like to stress that this webinar will be made available afterwards if people want to check up on some of the slides. But also regarding the rootstocks and the cultivars, you know, one can speak to the Citrus Research International directly as well. Right, welcome Skalk. I see you on the screen. Our third speaker today is Skalk Lombard. He's a private consulting agronomist supporting IntelliGrow. Skalk obtained a BSc Agricultural Honours degree in Soil Science and Plant Nutrition from the University of Pretoria in 1991. He started his career with the ARC, doing mainly fertigation trials on citrus, and then moved to Omnia as an agronomist for a while. Skalk has been active in plant nutrition for 30 years, and for the past 4 years has been actively supporting IntelliGrow agents in Limpopo and Mpumalanga on nutrition of mainly citrus, macadamia, and avocado. Skalk today will speak on the nutrition of grapefruit. Welcome, Skalk. Over to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Duncan, for that introduction. I didn't realize that I was so old, eh? But yes, thank you for the opportunity to share with you this afternoon some of the approach in terms of grapefruit nutrition that we do at IntelliGrow. So yes, just a short introduction to IntelliGrow for those of you that are not familiar with the company. IntelliGrow is a national company that provides integrated crop solutions to growers across South Africa. So what that basically means is that this includes the responsible use of crop protection products, both chemical and biological, and then also the implementation of specialized plant nutrition programs, also including chemical and biological products. This all then supported by technology platforms like IntelliFarm and CropWatch to transfer this knowledge to farm level. So yes, I've included the slide, which is very similar to Johan's slide, just indicating the area where I keep myself busy. And if we look at specifically grapefruit nutrition, basically in the northern areas, the hot and dry areas that Johan mentioned there in Waipi. Vivo, there's some new plantings, and then also in the Ellis Rice area. But from a bigger citrus perspective, IntelliGrow is involved on the crop protection side, basically in the Nelspruit, Lydenburg, Hoedspruit, Oorigstad and Burgersfort areas, as well as in the Chippies area. So we fairly cover a lot of hectares in terms of citrus crop protection and plant nutrition. So yes, I've basically divided my talk into two parts. The first is the establishment of new orchards, and then the nutrition of non-bearing trees. And the second part is then the nutrition of bearing trees. So let's get on with this. I think the first step in terms of establishing a new orchard, and the most important action that the grower can do is to have a proper soil survey done. So this must include your soil physical characteristics as well as soil chemical characteristics, and I think that in a lot of instances this step is underestimated in terms of importance by a lot of growers. The errors that you make at this stage will haunt you for the lifetime of that orchard. And the information that you get out of this soil survey in terms of soil physical properties like soil depth and water holding capacity will impact all your other decisions, like should I plant on ridges or not, which areas to group together in terms of irrigation blocks and water holding capacity, as well as how deep do I have to prepare my soil in terms of impermeable layers and drainage problems. So that on the soil physical side, and then from a chemical point of view, your full soil chemical maps in terms of macronutrients as well as micronutrients. If you don't ameliorate subsoil acidity at this stage, you are going to struggle for the rest of the lifetime of that orchard to do that. Right, so in terms of the optimal ranges for nutrients in the soil, this is from the Citrus Research International. Phosphorus, Bray 1 analysis or Bray 1 extraction method, 25 to 35 milligrams per kilogram in new orchards, and then existing orchards around about 50 milligrams per kilogram. You will also see that your base cations like potassium, calcium, magnesium is expressed as a percentage of cation exchange capacity, and that is the ratios that we aim for. if you are establishing an orchard on a very sandy soil, I will also have a look at the physical analysis in milligrams per kilograms, especially potassium and magnesium, because if those levels of these nutrients are within the percentage range but low on a milligram per kilogram basis, then you'll also have to ameliorate. So fairly simple. If you know then that you need to increase your phosphate level with 20 milligrams per kilogram. So if you start with, let's say, a 5 milligrams per kilogram initial analysis, you can physically calculate exactly how much product you need to broadcast per hectare using your soil bulk density and the percentage of nutrient that the specific product is in. So this is a bit of mathematics combined with soil science and not rocket science. So it's just a calculation that you can do. Right, so when you've established, you've done your soil preparation and you are planting your trees now, the question is usually, what is the next step? Should I incorporate fertilizer into the planting hole? Do I use organic matter or not? And at IntelliGrow for, I think, more than 10 years, we've been using polymer-coated controlled release fertilizer for the establishment of new orchards. And this method has outperformed basically every other method of nutrient application, whether it be fertigation or hand split applications by hand. And the reason for this is basically the constant release of nutrients in that root zone, the stable and constant electrical conductivity in that root zone, which minimizes the risk of root burning and tree loss. And what usually also happens on farms is that your young trees is more than often the lowest priority on the farm. So all the resources are channeled to producing orchards, like labor, for instance, and these young trees are usually neglected in terms of nutrition. That is what I find on a lot of farms. So yes, the application rate per tree of this controlled release fertilizer is based on tree size. So you will see that for a medium tree in year 1, we start with an application of 440 grams per tree. Then in year 2, we will go up to about 600 grams per tree, and then year 3 and 4, going up to about 1.5 and 3 kilograms per tree. Now, looking at yield data, comparing cumulative yield over 8 years on blocks that we've established with controlled release fertilizer as opposed to the farmer's own practice, cumulatively after 8 years, you have a yield increase of about 97 tons per hectare. So definitely a successful method to use in terms of establishing young trees. Just in terms of placement, what we do, so this will typically be how we apply that 440 grams in year 1 in 4 slots around the tree, approximately 10 to 20 centimeters deep in your hotter soils. You'll apply it a bit deeper in terms of soil temperature, because temperature will be basically the only factor that determines the release rate of nutrients out of this product. So you will make 4 slots around the stem at 90-degree angles, and then apply about 100 grams into each slot. And this will then be sufficient basically for a season. So in terms of application, we usually apply the controlled release fertilizer when soil temperatures start increasing in August or September here in the southern hemisphere. And then basically your nutrition for that season is sorted, and you can go on with your other production blocks and attend to them. This is just one example. In Limpopo, farmer planted these trees in April of that year, and the multicoat was applied in September. This is 12 months of growth, basically in the next season in September. So we find that you get a very even growth in a block. All the trees are similar, and a very rapid expansion in terms of tree volume. This is in Koleni Valley, where we were actually present the day that the farmer applied his controlled release fertilizer. If I could zoom in, you will see that the trees at that stage on the 17th of August was basically standing still, no new growth. You could see chlorosis symptoms on some of the new flash that appeared, and this is the sort of growth that we got basically after about 6 weeks of growth in that area. So very exceptional concept, and definitely in terms of success of establishing young trees, something that I would recommend widely. Right, so going on to bearing trees in terms of the principles that is important. I think the most important aspect when you're talking about bearing trees is to keep a proper history of soil and leaf analysis per management block. So if you can irrigate and fertilize a block together, treat that as a management block and keep history from year one. If you don't do that, quite frankly, every year you are just staring at a page full of numbers, and then you are starting on a clean page with your fertilizer program. Using this approach, you will also identify trends in what happens in soil chemical properties over time. And you can also identify sampling errors or lab errors quite quickly, so that you don't base your whole season's fertilizer program on an incorrect sample or an incorrect lab analysis. So these are the leaf norms that we use for grapefruit, specifically in South Africa. So you will see in terms of nitrogen, a leaf percentage level of 2.3 to 2.6, potassium of 0.9 to 1.6. And by keeping your leaf analysis history, you will quickly see what trends is happening in your tree and what the effect of your fertilizer program is. So you will see, for instance, if you look at the nitrogen graph, from 2014, this specific block has increased in nitrogen level up to a point where it's sitting at close to 2.5. And you can then adjust your fertilizer application accordingly in terms of what production outputs you are looking for. So just I want to emphasize this again, that if you do not graphically present your history, you do not see these trends. You will also see that in the potassium graph in 2018, there was a dip in potassium levels, whilst in all the other years, they were fairly similar. So if you only looked at that 2018 potassium level, you would have applied a lot of additional potassium, which was not really necessary. Right, so to compile a fertilizer or a nutrition program, you have to start somewhere. And the first point is to see what you are aiming for. So these are the nutrient removal figures per hectare per ton of fruit. And you can see that there's a lot of variation in terms of what is being used across South Africa. within the accepted averages there at the bottom. So for grapefruit, for instance, you'll see that in terms of nitrogen, the removal figure is 2 to 2.3 kilograms per ton of fruit. So based on the production history of that specific orchard, you can say, right, I want to compile a program for a 70 or a 75 ton per hectare harvest, and start there. This is an example of an existing program. So having the cultivar information as well as the rootstock, and then trying to display as much as possible history on the block form. So you will have your graphical representation of about 4 to 5 years of history, within 2 to 3 years of physical history on the block form. So these are some of those soils that Johan has also spoken about. Characteristically high soil pHs. You can see a pH KCl there of 8.08 in the previous year and 6.6 in this year. And then also characteristically high magnesium levels. So you can see magnesium levels sitting at above 25 to 31% of exchangeable cations. Looking at the leaf analysis, also low on NP and K, zinc a problem. And with this data, you can then start compiling your fertilizer program with that yield target of 75 tons per hectare. So just going on in terms of the physical fertilizer program, the application of products during the different development stages of the fruit and the tree, starting with your phosphates, and you will also see there the percentage distribution there on the right in terms of how much of each nutrient is applied during each development stage of the tree. So in this specific instance, you will see that we've used urea phosphate as a phosphate source to lower soil pH and to try and acidify the soil in the root zone to a certain extent. This specific example is a fertigated block. So we use water-soluble products where calcium nitrate would be the preferred nitrogen source, as opposed to, for instance, ammonium sulfate, which will add a lot of salts as well to the root zone. Potassium nitrate is a potassium source, and again, if you look at the percentage distribution, the bulk of the potassium applied during flower development, and a little bit less thereafter. So looking at the rate in terms of grams per tree, you will start with your 75 tons multiplied by 2.3 kilograms. So that will give you around about 150 kilograms of N that you need to apply, and then taking into account the history of your leaf analysis. So you will remember that in this example, our leaf analysis showed that nitrogen levels were below the norm. So we are applying a bit more of nitrogen to adjust our nitrogen levels. The same applies for phosphates. If you calculate the removal of phosphates for a 75-ton crop, this will be around about 20 kilograms of phosphates that you apply. But if you look at the phosphate analysis of 18 milligrams per kilograms, you can quickly calculate how much additional P to apply in order to raise your level to the 50 parts per million that is prescribed by CRI. So in terms of fertilizer and the strategy that you follow, the long-term strategy in terms of soil management and fertilizer application would be then to to manage your soils in such a way that we get to those ratios as prescribed by CRI, whereafter you can then just fertilize in terms of crop removal. In addition to your normal nitrogen, phosphate, and potassium and calcium nutrients, we also look at the biological side of soil, using biological products to enhance root health. So there we focus on humic and fulvic acids. We apply products with our Bacillus and Trichoderma soil biological products, and then also silica in terms of what we want to achieve in terms of root health. So you will also see in this example an application of a micronized gypsum that to supply calcium and sulfur in terms of that ratios that I was referring to earlier. Right, so in addition to a soil fertilizer program, we will also, sorry, that was not right. So in addition to the soil fertilizer program, we will also apply foliar nutrients. The main aim of this program basically to support processes in the tree that enhances carbohydrate management. So you will see that we will start off with a low biorate urea application. In addition with that, a magnesium nitrate or a potassium nitrate according to magnesium and potassium levels or leaf analysis. And if your potassium levels is fairly low, we will also substitute a part or a portion of the urea, low biorate urea, with potassium nitrate, a part of or all of it. That will be during your bud swell development stage, and then during bud break, we will supply our trace elements, especially copper, which is essential for pollen viability, and then also some phosphates for energy transfer during photosynthesis and the assimilation of carbohydrates. So all of this leading up to enhance our flower quality and then improve set. So the biological products that we incorporate into this program entails polyamines as well as amino acids. The polyamines shown to improve fruit set and an even set, and the amino acids to mitigate yield stress and minimize physiological drop. Sorry. So yes, in terms of this foliar program, during that first initial rapid cell division stage, we will also supply the plant with calcium, as well as additional phosphates for that energy transfer during photosynthesis. And then during the cell enlargement stage, basically look at elements like potassium, phosphates, the polyamines again, and additional calcium. I think one of the most important actions in terms of fertilizer and nutrition management in citrus is your post-harvest foliars, as well as your soil applications, because this will help with carbohydrate assimilation and storage, which will be used for your next period of bud swell and flowering and fruit set. So that, Duncan and ladies and gentlemen, is basically in a nutshell what our program entails, or the approach in terms of nutrition. I've just added some photos so that the viewers in the Eastern and Western Cape can see what grapefruit should look like. And then we also have some of our own unique problems while sampling and collecting soil samples in orchards. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kalk. Thank you so much for that presentation. I used to manage a fruit farm for my son's deciduous fruit farm, and on sandy swells every 2 weeks, when after establishment we used to go through and put fertilizer, and then on heavier soils once a month we used to put fertilizer in grams per tree. So this controlled release concept of yours is very interesting, and I think the SQM plant coat range can slot in very nicely with this controlled release concept. But interesting indeed that you got good results with that. But thank you for your knowledgeable talk, and it's time to move on to our final speaker, is Felipe Garziera. Felipe is an agronomist who graduated in the Bahia State University in Brazil, specializing in tropical irrigated fruticulture. Felipe has 25 years of experience working in plant nutrition and fertigation. His professional activities have been honed in more than 40 countries. His family are also mango and table grape farmers in Brazil, so he has hands-on experience there. Felipe has now worked for SQM for 10 years, 7 years based in Brazil, and currently for the last 3 years, he is the SQM Global Marketing Development Manager, and he's now based in Belgium. Felipe will speak on potassium nitrate in grapefruit with reference to foliar and soil applications, and also the HLB greening disease. So a warm welcome to you, Felipe, too, and over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Duncan. Thanks for having me, and thanks for the opportunity to be here with all of you today. It's really a pleasure to me. As the title says, you're talking about the potassium nitrate, soil foliar applications, and also something related in HLB. As SQM as company, we are the producer of all the three potassium sources, nitrate, chloride, and sulfate. And normally part of our job is exactly, provide the right information and the right decisions for the farmer to decide, which one is the best source to use, is the best potassium source to use it in each moment. And if you look to the nutrient extraction of the grapefruit, as our previous speaker just showed to us, let's take this average accepted in South Africa between the nutrient removal per metric ton of fresh fruit produced. So if you look at, you see that nitrogen and potassium are the one extracted in highest amount as almost all the crops. Normally for almost, we have some exceptions, but almost all the crops have nitrogen and potassium as the nutrient most removed. And then normally we follow this path that's between calcium, magnesium, and phosphorus. So this is the removal. So if you take this into account, and in order to be efficient with nutrient management, when you're talking about plant nutrition, we need to talk a little bit about chemistry. So it's not about products, but it's about chemistry, because plants or the roots cannot recognize products, but they can recognize chemical elements. And then it's about the balance. So if you look to these elements, we have some with positive charge, as you can see, plus sign, and other ones with the negative charge. The positive ones is the one that you call the cations, and the negative is the anions. And the plant, in order to keep the electrical balance, needed to uptake cations and anions in balance. So if you look, if plant needs to uptake in quantity nitrogen, potassium, calcium, and magnesium, we see that potassium, calcium, and magnesium has a positive charge. They are cations. And nitrogen is an element that can be present in both forms. A nitrate with a negative charge, as you can see here, as with potassium nitrate, or with calcium nitrate, or magnesium nitrate, or in uric or ammoniacal form, urea or ammonia form. Let's put urea will be converted in ammonium. So then let's put all in the, let's say, on the ammoniacal side. So then you can have nitrogen nitric form or in ammoniacal form. The difference one is that nitrogen in ammoniacal form is a cation with positive charge. So then we need the idea with the nutritional program is help the plant in uptake and be more efficient with the nutrient uptake. So when we decided to use potassium nitrate as one of the potassium sources, since potassium is one of the nutrients most required, we are also adding in the soil solution nitrate nitrogen. That is also the element, the second element most required, but in an ion form with negative charges. And this will help the plant in uptake the other elements, the other cations that the plant most need, as you can see here. This is what we call the antagonism and synergism in agriculture. And so if you have nitrogen present in soil in ammoniacal form, that means it's a positive charge. Together with that ammoniacal nitrogen, plant cannot uptake calcium, magnesium, or potassium because all these elements are cations, they have positive charge. In the opposite, if you have nitrate nitrogen in the soil solution, nitrate as an ion with negative charge can be uptaken, keeping the electrical balance with positive charges. So when we have more nitrate nitrogen in soil solution, this means that chemically we are helping the plant or making it more easy to the plant uptake the other cations like potassium, calcium, and magnesium. As we saw, these are the nutrients most required by the plant. So enrich our soil solution or our fertilization scheme with nitrate nitrogen helps the plant in uptaking more cations. And since potassium is the nutrient most required by the nutrient extraction of grapefruits, it's very welcome use at least part of our potassium source in grapefruit in soil application as potassium nitrate in order to enrich the soil solution with more nitrate, nitrogen, and negative charges. Also, another benefit that we can mention when we have higher nitrate, nitrogen content in soil solution, it's using the same principle from the antagonism and synergies. Nitrates, it's antagonist to chloride because both elements have negative charges. So since plant is uptaking nitrate nitrogen, plant will not uptake together with this nitrate nitrogen chloride if chloride is present in soil solution. So let's say for the ones that are growing grapefruits in saline areas and this salinity is caused by chloride, it's also an extra reason to enrich your soil solution with nitrate nitrogen. Then I would like to move and show you some examples of trials about foliar applications of potassium nitrate. Started with a March variety, the white one, as we just also saw in the previous presentation of one of our colleagues. Now, it was a trial conducted in the University of Florida by Dr. Bowman with March grapefruit with a randomizing design with 3 applications, specifically during the fruit fill stage. This application was done in the North Hemisphere. Remember that was done in Florida, so we are in the North Hemisphere. So it was done there between September and October, with 3 applications of 22, more or less 1%, 0.95 to be precise. That resulting in 22.4 kilograms of potassium nitrate per application. Since there they use 2,350 liters per hectare. That is in total 62 kilos as foliar application, just during the fruit development stage, to see the impact of this on fruit size. And that was the result achieved. You see the increase from September 10, this was when they started the first application. And then on November 23, after the last application, they measured the increase on fruit size in the control and in the treated area. So in the control area, naturally, this is the natural growth of the grapefruits, the fruit increased in 8.4%, the fruit size between September 10 till November 23. On the treated area, with the 3 foliar applications, the increase in fruit size, it was in 11% in the same period from September 10 till November 23. This difference in increase result at the harvesting moment in a difference in the percentage of fruit per class. Now we have the class 0, 1, 1, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2 or more than 3. These are according to the size of the fruit. And what we can see, this result, is that if you look to the class above 2, that is the classes with the highest fruit size, that normally this is the class that has the better price in the market. In the treated area, we reached 61% from the fruits in the class that was in the fruits with above class 2. And the control treatment get 26% of the fruits in this class. This has an important, especially economical impact, because the fruits with bigger size normally at the market has a higher value. Also, another trial, but this with another variety of grapefruit. This is ruby red grapefruit, also conducted with Dr. Bowman, also in Florida with a randomized design as well, but here with a different purpose. The purpose here was increase fruit set and fruit size. So then again, remember that this is in the North Hemisphere. In South Africa, we are in the South Hemisphere, so the months are different. But the application was done during the dormant period, that is in February in the North Hemisphere, at post-bloom in April, and during the fruit field between July. So here we have a different perspective from the previous trial, because the previous one, it was just impact fruit size, and this one, it's impact on fruit set and fruit size, and was evaluated different concentrations. That goes from 0, that's the control, till 1, 2, 3, and 4% concentration. And this is the amount of kilos applied. And let's go to the results achieved. The best result, it was reached with the application with 1% concentration. And then we can clearly see that the number of fruits per fruit size, that means per class, that means in blue one, lower than 32, this means fruit per boxes. And then as higher is the number of fruit per boxes, obviously smaller is the fruit size. So then we could see that in number of fruits per fruit size, we have an increase in 61%. Now when we do the comparison per fruit size, and also an increase in the number of boxes per tree. That means that the treatment has also an impact on fruit set and on fruit size. And the economical result of this, if you look to this graphic, these are the prices paid per box in the year of the trial. And then you can clearly see that boxes that contain less than 32 fruits per box, that means fruits with a bigger size. You can see that at that time it was $16 per box. And then you go fruits between 32, 36, $12, between 40, 48 fruits per box, $8, and more than 48 fruits per box, $6.5. So it means the smaller fruits. And here you can see the huge impact that the fruit size of the fruit class in grapefruit has, especially in the economic. Now, you can see on this case, taking this example and extrapolating to a commercial area, this will bring a result on net income about 5,700 on the gross income. Sorry, in the gross income about $5,700 per hectare. So this is the result when you do the applications with the targeting increase fruit set and also increasing fruit size. Also, another topic that's really in vogue today, it's the HLB, the Huang Longbin citrus greening, that normally affect the phloem transport system in the plants and also the root system. So plants that are affected by the HLB that normally has a weak root system that immediately affects the water and nutrient uptake. Plants affected with HLB that today in the world you have mainly three species, the Candidatus liberibacter, Asiaticus, Africanus, or Americanus. The Asiaticus is the most aggressive one. It's not yet in South Africa, as far as I know, but I heard that have several concerns about the. It's not if will, but when will arrive this one in South Africa. So really need to keep this in mind. And also the Africanus, that this is present in South Africa today. So concerning greening, the main point, as we mentioned, the greening affects the phloem system and the root system, making it difficult to the plant to uptake water and nutrients. So the strategies that we can use, it's obviously control the vector, the psyllid, as a farm, as a regional level as well. This is something that if one farmer controls, but the neighbor does not control, that will not be effective. Really needed to be done a control in regional level. Exactly as the HLB affects the root system, keep a balanced nutrition. It's really a key. It's the determinant factor because it's affected the roots. So then we really need to make sure that the plant will be able to uptake the right and proper amount of nutrients. In order to do this, keep the soil pH around 6.5. It's really important because that's the range when we have the highest, chemically, the highest availability of nutrients in soil. Split application as much as possible in order to plant uptaking nutrients in smaller amounts but frequently. That's perfect for fertigated areas. And complementary foliar nutrition. As the root system is one of the most affected system in plants, so decreasing the uptake of water and nutrients. So then complementary foliar nutrition works quite well. And this is exactly what I would like to show you in one trial also conducted in the United States against HLB in citrus. It was a 5-year trial. It's very well known, this trial. It's Maury-Boyd evaluation. Someone's called it Maury-Boyd cocktail. Also made by the associated professors Bob Rose and Fritz Roca in University of Florida. They evaluated several treatments, as you can see, foliar treatments. Straight potassium nitrate with micronutrients, with other micronutrients, with salicylic acid, with different combinations. And they did several applications to evaluate which one will be the most effective, the cost-effective treatment for HLB. And these are some pictures from the trees. As you can see, the trees in the first year in 2008. How was the shape of the trees at the beginning of the evaluation? Now, the picture 2 is after in 2012, 4 years after the start of the trial. And this one, it was in 2014, already 6 to 7 years after the trial. So we can really see the change in the plants. And what was the result, the outcome from this trial? For this 5-year trial, the cumulative net yield and income. We could see that the net yield cumulative, it was the highest achieved by a mix between micronutrients, macronutrients, and phosphorus source. And secondly, with straight potassium nitrate. This is when it becomes in yield. But when you look to the economics, now when you do the cost-benefit analysis, we see that with straight potassium nitrate, we have the best result from the economical perspective. When you do the cost-benefit analysis, then we reach the highest net result with straight foliar applications of potassium nitrate. So these were some basic information just to share with you. Thank you, Duncan. Thank you all. And we are available to share more information if you wish.
Thank you, Felipe, for your presentation. We have one question that came up while John was speaking, and the question might have been answered when Johan was speaking. It's a question from Thijs, and perhaps I'll ask Johan. Thijs asks, how does 914 compare with red hot grapefruit? Johan, perhaps you can come in. Okay, it looks like Johan and John have probably started their braai fires. Oh, you there?
I'm here, Duncan.
Yeah, okay. Now, I thought maybe you'd gone to have your first beer and have a braai. But the question was, how does 914 compare with Red Heart Grapefruit? Now, I know that John touched on the 914 and you touched on the Red Heart. Is there any comparison? I know they're both sweet and they're probably both low in the FCs, but maybe you can elaborate.
Well, if you look at the combination, because the Red Heart is from a Henderson, the pink Henderson grapefruit, and basically radiated with the 914 is across with Ruby. John, am I right?
Yeah, Ruby and with the pomelo.
Pomelo, yeah.
Yeah, so that brings the sugar in.
Okay.
So it would have a higher sugar, a higher bricks probably, and a slightly lower acid. So the ratio would probably be higher in the hybrid 914 compared to Henderson, which is straight out of grapefruit.
Okay.
Does that answer the question?
Well, we'll Tace, I think, can contact you directly if he has more on that. But that was basically what his question was, I think.
Okay.
I have another question, perhaps for Skulk. I know we spray a lot of 4% potassium nitrate in citrus. Is 4% potassium nitrate safe in grapefruit as well?
Hi, Duncan. Yes, we've sprayed it at that concentration, so yes, no problem.
Okay, great. All right, gentlemen and ladies, I'd just like to thank you very much for attending. Just a reminder that we will make this webinar available for anyone who wants to look through it again. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you to the presenters, and I hope you have a great evening. Thank you very much.